want to do this. I thought it was based out of, this is what I'm called to do. And he's like, no, you're called to serve me.
Right.
You're not called to, nobody's called to a platform or to a position. You're called to a purpose or a people.
Well, this is the first interview with the man himself, Ethan Holloway.
What's up, guys?
And Zach Backus in the back. Backus in the back.
Yeah, I'm just the man behind the curtain.
Yeah.
I'm
The little
hiding
peek.
back here.
Dang. I want to start this video with a testimony because I didn't have this little washer on here, and it's all jumbly.
Yeah.
And I asked the Holy Spirit, can I find it? And I looked over there and I found it.
Let's go.
And I just vacuumed yesterday.
Look at God. Look at God.
So I
Andy
found
just
it.
vacuumed yesterday.
Yeah.
That's
So like,
that's a miracle.
despite all the odds.
Yep.
So
That's awesome.
I know you've been at Gateway for how many years now?
4 years. My wife
4
and I
years.
going on 4 years. Yep, we got there literally the week before COVID started, or quarantine started.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's when we got married.
Dang.
So it's like we got married and quarantine started. So I love my wife. I love you, Courtney. But we spent a lot of time together in quarantine. I was like, oh, this is crazy, dude.
So how did you like end up at Gateway? That was a journey in that.
My wife, man, it's all like, you got to marry somebody who listens to the Lord. So we were in a pretty rough season, and we knew our time was up where we were at, and I had been seeking out some different opportunities and actually got 2 job offers at churches that I was like, oh, this must be the Lord, right? Like, you know, you get an opportunity, it's like, oh, that's the Lord. Not necessarily. And we walked through this process. I actually get an offer letter for both jobs. And then Gateway comes up and they're like, hey, we're going to offer Courtney this job and for social media. And she knew, she's like, that's the Lord. And she's like, if you're marrying me, we're going to Gateway. And I was like, well, I heard the Lord on you first. So Lord, I'm going to trust you with this. And so we move up here to the DFW area, and I was let go from my job in Austin. I was doing real estate due to COVID. And I had been interviewing with Gateway. Come to find out, I got the job there. Well, then again, COVID happened. So at that point, they froze all hiring. So I didn't have a job. We just got married. Quarantine started. Moved to a new city. All this stuff happened, and it was just like boom. So I worked at Amazon for 3 months, and I worked on the airplanes at Amazon. And we knew though, like, that's where our heart was going to be at. And so we felt called to a church, not a position. I think a lot of people, that are in ministry are like, oh, I'm called to a position. Not necessarily. God calls you, I believe, to be a part of a house. And also, like, growing up, like, I've always wanted to be in ministry. And one of the best things, mentors have told me, people I've heard, is like, serve another man's vision. And so I just began serving at our North Fort Worth campus. Shout out Jacob Gonzalez, love you. And we, he really kind of took me under his wing. We just started serving together and all of that. And then I started working in our facilities department. So I'm very familiar with a broom and a vacuum. That was my pulpit.
I feel like a church, you kind of do everything.
Yeah, it was like, man, we cleaned that building, every seat in the auditorium, multiple times. It was an awesome experience. So, looking back now, I'm like, golly, Lord, that season could have been a little bit shorter. But in that time, the Lord just did something in my heart, and honestly, killed my pride and ego. If I'm being transparent, there's a lot of pride there that I was like, oh, I want to do this. I thought it was based out of, this is what I'm called to do. And he's like, no, you're called to serve me. You're not called to, nobody's called to a platform or to a position. You're called to a purpose or a people. And so my purpose was serving people. And I was in that position for a little under a year and a half. And then Jacob at the North Fort Worth campus calls me, and he says, hey man, come over to this campus. We want you to be our student coordinator. And I was like, that's great. We've been serving there. Our friends, our church family is there. And meanwhile, Courtney's rocking and rolling in social media, doing great. So I'm seeing my wife like thriving, and I'm going to work at 6 a.m. to go sweep floors and, take out the trash. But the Lord began to develop something in us, not just me, but in us, of like trusting Him. We get the call to go to North Fort Worth, and then about 5 months after that, we received a prophetic word that from a guy who had been removed from the situation, and he said the Lord is calling you into your next assignment.
Wow.
And I looked at him and I was like, I said his name and I was like, sir, I think you missed it. And he goes, he's an older gentleman and a mentor now, and he's like, young man, I didn't miss this one. I was like, oh. Dang. So that's what it's like to know God's voice. Cool. Yeah. You know, that's a different level of confidence that, you know, it's just different. But it was everything he said came to pass within 3 months. And so we got a call to go to the Grand Prairie campus, and we've been there. Shout out to my Grand Prairie campus. Love you guys. Y'all are home for us. They've really welcomed Courtney and I in, and we've been there about a year and 4 months, almost a year and a half, man. So yeah, it's been awesome.
Dang, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's been cool.
You talked a lot about like killing that pride, and I feel like as young leaders, that's something, especially with my generation, we kind of have to deal with. Like, we want things quick, we want it now. So what's some advice that you give young leaders that might need to start at a lower spot, but just need to, you know, keep that humility going?
Serve somebody else's vision and do it well. Like, if you're gonna serve somebody else's vision, you need to take their heart and like what do you want to see happen in, you know, in the church setting. Like, if I'm in student ministry, I'm serving, you know, the campus pastor and our executive team, right? And so it's really capturing their heart. And I have my own dreams, I have my own ideas, I have my own, you know, visions and things I want to see happen.
Right.
But ultimately, I'm going to submit to the leadership that's above me. We've all been under great leadership, and we've all been under bad leadership. Yep. God honors submission. So I'm held accountable for how I respond. I'm not held accountable for how they treat me.
That's good.
Which is hard, because then what happens is, if you allow bitterness to seep in, your vision becomes the primary thing,
right? And
that's where that pride is allowed to live. And so ask yourself this question: if you're kind of in that season of like frustration, spiritual frustration, I believe there is a thing of godly frustration, but ask yourself, what needs to die? Something in you. Is it your pride? Is it your ego? There's a season where I laid down dreams that God had given me of like, hey, I'm just going to give this to you, and we're going to see what happens. And now the Lord has multiplied that times 10. I mean, Courtney and I are seeing blessings right now. It's just awesome to see. And it's easy to look from the outside and be like, oh, that just happened because, no, there were years and a lot of tears and frustration that really went into that. So if you're coming up in leadership and you're coming up and I'm still coming up, like I'm growing right now. Courtney and I are really growing in this season. But something has to die. So that's a good question you need to ask. And it's not about you. Like, as much as we would like to think it's about us, it's really not. You know, ministry is very easy for us to think it's about us. You have a microphone, you're preaching, you're doing all this stuff. People, hey, would you come pray for me? Hey, would you come speak at this school or do this or that? It's not about you, and it's about the people we're serving. And so with those perspectives, though, you become a better disciple of Jesus.
Wow. And
that just really flows into everything else.
That's awesome, man. Well, thank you for the few questions I have for you, man.
Of course.
And Ethan Holloway, everybody. Follow us on Instagram. I'm gonna put it somewhere, maybe in the description or something. But yeah, thanks again.
Awesome. You're awesome, dude.